Welcome to the local campaign. Thank you for joining us for this debate for the residents of Rideau-Rockcliffe Ward, Ward 13. I'm going to introduce the two candidates who are here for the debate in just a moment, but let me explain how this is going to work. First of all, we will have opening statements. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to address you directly, and then we'll move into a series of debates about a number of different topics that are important in Rideau-Rockcliffe and throughout the city. We will start each of those debates with a question directed at one of the two candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to answer that question. Then we'll open it up to a few minutes of debate on that topic. And when we've wrapped up the debate, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was originally addressed. And that candidate will have 30 seconds to finish off on that subject. We'll move through a number of different debate topics that way. We may also have time for some rapid fire questions on a couple of other topics where each candidate will have a minute to respond to that question. And then we'll have closing statements. The order for the opening and closing statements was drawn at random before our telecast. So let's introduce the candidates who are here seeking your vote on October the 22nd in the municipal election in Rideau-Rockcliffe Ward. They are Toby Nusbaum and Peter Heyck. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for being here. And Toby Nusbaum, we'll start with your opening statement. You've got 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good evening, everybody, or good morning, whatever time of day you're listening. It has been my privilege to represent you at City Hall over the last 4 years. Hopefully, we've had a chance to meet in person at one of my monthly drop-ins, at events throughout the ward, or perhaps at your door. I've made it a point to continue to knock on doors to make sure that I hear about your questions, ideas, and how you think we can do things better at City Hall. I am running for re-election as City Councillor with two main objectives: improving the quality of life for all residents and working to make Ottawa an even better city. To achieve both goals, we need to focus on building a more accountable, a more affordable, and a more ambitious city for everyone. So over the course of the next 30 minutes, I look forward to talking more about what that means in detail and earning your trust so that when you go to vote on October 22nd, I've earned your vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is Peter Heyck. You have a minute as well. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Toby, and thank you, everyone at home watching today. My name is Peter Heyck, and I'd like to tell you why I'm running for Ottawa City Council. I love Ottawa. I believe Ottawa is one of the best cities in Canada in which to live, but we have some serious challenges. We've made significant progress in many areas, but not everyone living here in Ottawa has felt the benefits of that progress. I don't want you to feel the need for you to move to another neighborhood to feel safer, or feel you need to move in order to access a better paying job, or to be able to send your child to a better school. I don't want anyone living here in Ottawa to feel as if they have been left behind. And if I'm elected, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let's move to some debates on some of the important topics in the ward and throughout the city. And I'll start with a question to you, Toby Nusbaum. You'll have 45 seconds to respond to this. Transit fares have been increasing in Ottawa by a rate higher than inflation. Some people are saying they're becoming unaffordable. Have transit fares in Ottawa become too high?
The short and the easy answer is yes, they have. And when this issue came up at Council, I put forward a motion to try and freeze transit fares, especially during the period of LRT construction. I argued that at the time when we needed our transit riders to stay with us, to remain loyal, that was the time to make sure that we were putting a hold on the increases in transit fares. Unfortunately, my motion at Council failed, and we'll talk a little bit more over the course of the next little while about why that was and dynamics around the Council table. But the short answer is transit fares are too high. They're among the highest in Canada, and we need to do something about it.
Okay, it's open to both of you on this. Either of you can lead off.
Well, I mean, maybe just to finish that thought, yes. I mean, it is crazy to think that here we are in the city of Ottawa with the highest cash fare of any city in Canada, and the economics are very clear. The higher the transit fares, the less likely that people are going to make that move from, let's say, driving their car to moving into transit. And I really do think that Ottawa has a long way to go in terms of figuring out a way of making those transit fares more affordable, making sure that we're encouraging residents to take transit. That's what we need to do to have a sustainable transportation system. And there's no question in my mind that transit fares are an obstacle to many people making that shift. I've heard that from residents. It's about fares, it's about reliability of service, and I think the least thing we can do is to make sure that those fares are affordable.
Okay. Go ahead.
I couldn't agree with Toby more. Fares are becoming more and more unaffordable for a certain segment of the population. It may be a case where we're going to have to look to another level of government, in this case the provincial government, to see how we can subsidize that or how we can get additional funding because that can't continue on the current rate it's continuing. There are certain people that are just, it's too much of an obstacle in order for them to take public transit.
So what can be done about it then? How do you make sure that you freeze transit fares? Because you tried and weren't successful last time.
Yeah, so I think part of the issue is in the previous term of council between 2010 and 2014, council established a policy where it said that OC Transpo needs to get a minimum amount of its revenue from transit fares, so-called fare box revenue. And the reality of that is that number is too high. So we have to think more innovatively and more broadly about how we can make sure that OC Transpo has the money it needs to get the job done. And whether, if that's by increasing the transit levy that we apply, and by the way, there are whole sections of our city where the transit levy is not applied, and I think that's an important policy shift we have to make. I think we do need to look at other levels of government and make sure that they are supporting a system that ultimately has benefits for other levels of government too, whether it's through environmental or public health benefits. Those are the types of concrete changes that we have to make sure transit is affordable.
Okay, you have the final 30 seconds on this if there's anything else you want to say on that subject. I asked you the question, Toby, so go ahead and finish off if you like.
Yeah, no, I mean, simply to say that the research is really, really clear that when you lower transit fares, you get higher ridership. And so in pure economic terms, there's a lot of benefit to doing that. The good news is that we did introduce a low-income fare. It's called the Equipass, and that does give low-income residents an opportunity, but I think for all residents, we have to think much more thoughtfully about how we make transit affordable.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next debate, and I'll address the question to you, Peter Heyck. Should the city have been more proactive in addressing the opioid crisis, for example, by initiating and supporting supervised injection facilities rather than relying on volunteers with a community organization to set up an injection site in a neighborhood park? You've got 45 seconds.
Yes, I believe the city should have been more proactive in this case. I believe that supervised injection sites are a necessity. They do quite a bit of good for the community in terms of health. And I believe that it's a shame that the provincial government will be pulling funding for this. So I think in the next budget, we'll have to look at where we're going to find additional resources in order to continue this project. I don't believe, however, they should be concentrated in the same area. They seem to be all concentrated in the same ward. I believe there are people with substance abuse issues in every ward in the city. So there should actually be supervised injection sites in every ward across the city.
Okay, it's open to both of you now.
Well, maybe I can add, Mark, that there are actually two parts to this story. The first is there was a discussion and various views around the council table about whether council should be in favor of supervised injection sites. I was one of only a few councillors who publicly voiced support for supervised injection sites, and eventually our public health board did formally notify the province that we wanted to get funding for a couple of different sites throughout the city. So that finally was an important step, but I was disappointed that there weren't louder voices around the council table supporting that effort. And then the second issue that many of you may remember is when the opioid crisis was really at its maximum about a year ago, when we had people every week in Ottawa dying as a result of overdosing from opioids. There was a group of volunteers who set up a tent in a desolate patch of grass in Lower Town because they felt that that was the only opportunity to try and break the back on this problem. And I was one of 3 councillors who went and visited that site to demonstrate my gratitude to these volunteers who were spending their evenings trying to save the lives of their fellow citizens. And luckily there was funding for a full-time trailer, which eventually, thanks to the province, got established, and so we were on the right course. But yes, the question now from Queen's Park about whether funding will be forthcoming is worrisome, and I think we're going to have to look very, very carefully and thoughtfully about how we ensure that our existing sites continue, both in the market, the downtown area, and on the western side of downtown at the Somerset West Health Centre. So much more work to do, but we got to make sure that we keep these places open to save the lives of our fellow citizens.
Okay. Peter Heyck, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I'd just like to add that I believe opioid addiction, as with many addictions, is a healthcare issue. It's a disease just like any other, and it's not a job for law enforcement. So I believe this is definitely a role for Ottawa Health to play, even if the provincial government will not support it.
Okay, and I did ask you the question, so you have another 30 seconds you can use to wrap up on this topic. No. Okay, all right, we'll leave it there. So next question for Toby Nusbaum. What can be done to address the rising cost of housing in Ottawa and also the chronic problem of homelessness?
Yeah, the fact that a city as wealthy and prosperous as Ottawa has a waiting list for affordable housing of in the neighborhood of 10,000 people is something that should worry all of us. And it's time that cities, and particularly our city, looked to new ways of trying to solve this problem. Luckily, there is a new opportunity, which is called inclusive zoning, which is a planning tool that Queen's Park gave cities about a year ago to look at ways when they are approving development applications to assist on a certain number of affordable units. And that's now something that Ottawa is going to have to explore, and I think that offers a really important opportunity for us to start solving this problem.
Okay, it's open to both of you now on affordable housing and affordability of housing. After you.
Well, maybe just to add one more thing, Mark, which is, there's also the fact that as we build the light rail transit system, we are increasingly recognizing that there are going to be new opportunities to build affordable housing for residents that gives them very good transportation access. And so a number of us have started initiating further discussion within the housing community about ways in which we can make sure that as the LRT grows throughout our city, that we're thinking thoughtfully about how we can ensure that the density that's built around the transit system can also include opportunities for building affordable units. We have to work closely with landlords and the private sector to make sure that we are doing rent supplements properly. Housing ultimately is also about a broader range of social services, so we have to be coordinated in terms of making sure that when we do provide someone with a house who's in need of other assistance, supports, or mental health assistance of some kind, that we're also coordinating our broad social services to ensure that they can succeed in whatever new housing that they may be living in for the first time. So it's an integrated system. It's important. The city has to do better. Okay.
Peter Heyck, did you want to talk more about this?
Yes, I'd like to add.
You don't have to wait for me to call on you, by the way. Just jump in whenever you can.
I'm just that kind of a polite of a guy. I believe the city should do more. There are 10,000 people on a waiting list in order to enter Ottawa City housing. I believe the city does have land allocated that it owns. I believe it should accelerate the development of this land for that purpose. So council definitely has to do a better job of trying to get some housing units built for that purpose.
Yeah, one of the issues, too, that I think it's important to mention is the notion of housing first came up to a great extent when Council had a debate about moving the Salvation Army shelter. And one of the problems that a number of us had with that application is that the city's focus and its investments and its energies really ought to be focused on making sure that people have access to housing with a door, with a lock. And shelters, while in an important part of that system, are only one part.
Now, you do have the final 30 seconds on this because I asked you the question, so go ahead.
Sure. Well, maybe just to finish that thought. So this notion of trying to solve the housing crisis is really important, too, in terms of the spectrum of housing needs we have in the city. So again, shelters are a part of that system, but some of the problems that some of us had around the Salvation Army application was simply not building a single large shelter with 350 beds, in some ways without thinking more thoughtfully and broadly about making sure we have housing first.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the next question now, to Peter Heyck. Should the city's policing budget be increased by a greater rate than 2% every year? And what else can be done to address the rising gun violence in Ottawa? You've got 45 seconds to start things off here.
Yes, we definitely need to increase the policing budget. I've seen some estimates by law enforcement experts that we are short approximately 200 officers in order to police a city of our size. That's completely unacceptable. We do need to tackle gang and gun violence. We need to get guns off the street. It's not as big a problem as in Toronto, but that's not the point. We're not running for Toronto City Council, and we don't want to wait until the problem gets that big. The police budget has been reduced year after year since Mayor Watson came into office in 2010. It used to occupy a larger percentage of the budget. Now it's been reduced almost in half. I think it's down to 9% as a percentage of the budget. I think that's unacceptable.
Okay, it's open to both of you now on policing and on gun violence in Ottawa.
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of important factors that we have to consider. One of them is the Ottawa Police Service made some changes to the way that it functioned about a year and a half ago, which ended up reducing the number of community officers. So the people who are walking the beat, who know the neighborhoods, who get to know individual people, on whom often, you know, you would see these people on first name basis with business owners and people who are walking about. And the reduction in that contingent, I think, was unfortunate because it's exactly that type of public trust and the relationships that these officers were building, which is critical to breaking the back of criminality and again, building public trust among the citizenry. And so that's something we need to focus on. The police services budget has actually increased by 2% every year since 2010. It hasn't reduced, actually. It's gone up. And one of the challenges is if you reduce it even more, or if you increase it even more, then where is that money coming from? And what are we doing in terms of solving the broader issues around criminality, which have a lot to do with poverty and the lack of social service provision and so on and so forth? So I don't think the solution to crime is simply staffing up and hiring more officers. It's thinking thoughtfully about how we address, in some ways, the roots of criminality, which are often found in different areas and unfortunately have a high relationship with other social service problems.
Go ahead, Peter Heyck, if you've got more to say on this.
Well, that's certainly true, but it won't make victims of crime feel any better to know that it was 18% as a percentage of the budget in 2010, and now it's 9% of the budget. So it certainly is getting a lower slice, a reduced slice of the budget in terms of allocation of resources. I do agree with you, Toby, though, that we do need more community policing. We need to have communities served by people of color. I believe we need to see more visible minorities on the police force. And in a sense, the city's been doing a great job of that, but we do need more community policing. We need to have people actually policing the community that they live in, and I think that would go a long way in order to creating a sense of trust in some areas.
Okay, I asked you the question, Peter Heyck, so you have another 30 seconds on this.
No, I think we've covered it, unless Toby would like to add more.
Okay, we'll leave it there. And we'll move on to a couple of questions now where I'll ask both candidates a question, and they'll each have 60 seconds to comment on that topic. So first question is, what's the most important infrastructure investment in your ward, and how will you make sure it happens? Toby Nusbaum, you can go first.
So ultimately, the most important infrastructure investment in our ward over the last couple of years has been the former Rockcliffe Air Base, which is now called Wateridge Village, which is the largest infill project in the history of the city of Ottawa, which is going to see ultimately a whole community grow out of an area that used to house the old air base. So from parks and schools and playgrounds and homes and roads and sidewalks, this is going to be a transformative moment for our ward, and it's going to be very important to continue to make sure that it works, that it doesn't cause transportation gridlock, that we're making sure that it's got excellent transit access, that people have options on active transportation, walking or cycling to downtown. So it's got there's amazing opportunity for this to contribute to our ward, and we have to watch the challenges.
Okay. Peter Heyck, same question to you.
I think that's a very exciting opportunity. What was once the old Rockcliffe base, I think it's about time that we've started to develop that, and it's come a long way. And I do think it's an amazing opportunity to grow a city within a city. So I look forward to seeing how that project continues. In terms of infrastructure, there's certainly areas within the ward that are in need of repair work on roads and sidewalks and the parks. Some areas of the wards, Ward 13 is a very diverse ward. There's certainly a lot of disparity between the neighborhoods. Some are visited and a lot more frequently by city staff, but definitely roads, sidewalks, parks, that's something that we need to build on. It's an investment in the future.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I'll start with you, Peter Heyck. And should the maximum personal donation limit for City Council candidates, which was raised to $1,200, should it be lowered? And are there any other changes to municipal government, including the size and structure of City Council, that you would be in favor of?
I believe the donation limit is appropriate for our city our size. In terms of any changes I would make, I believe there's a boundary review coming up for the wards. I'm not in favor of reducing any of our wards or reducing the number of councillors at City Hall. The reasons that Premier Ford has for reducing the number of seats on City Council in Toronto was because he felt there was too much debate and there wasn't enough work getting done. That's certainly not the problem here in Ottawa. If anything, there isn't enough debate. Many decisions are made before any vote is even held on the floor at City Hall. They're predetermined. We certainly could use a lot more debate, and I would like to see a lot more public involvement in that area.
Okay. Toby Nusbaum, same question to you.
So when I ran for council in 2014, one of my campaign priorities was reforming campaign finance. I thought it was unfair that corporations and unions had the opportunity to donate twice. And if you look at the campaign finance records of many candidates for City Council, they were dominated by development-oriented financial help to these candidates. And I put a motion forward to council within 100 days of being elected, and my motion lost. It lost 5 to 18. Only 5 of us were prepared to ensure that there were no corporate and union donations. And then what happened is the province ultimately agreed with the 5 of us, and now there are no corporate and union donations in municipal finance, and I'm grateful for that. It makes sure that citizens are the people who finance and ultimately choose their elected representatives.
Okay, we'll stop there, and we'll move to the closing statements. Again, we'll do these in the opposite order of the opening statements. That was determined by a draw just before we began our telecast. So we're going to start with Peter Heyck, and you have 1 minute to speak to the voters in Rideau-Rockcliffe.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Rogers Television, for hosting this debate, and thank you, Toby, for your public service. And I'd like to thank all of you at home for tuning in tonight. The election is Monday, October 22nd, and I'm hoping that everyone watching at home tonight will go out and vote. Now, obviously, I would like you to vote for me, but I think the important thing is at least you exercise your right to vote, because if you don't participate, this democracy can't really function properly. Thank you very much for watching tonight.
Okay, Toby Nusbaum, you have a minute as well.
Thank you, Mark. Over the past 4 years, I have worked hard on both of the main parts of this job, the work in the ward and the work around the council table. In the ward, I have made communication and accessibility a priority. From my regular electronic newsletter called Toby Talks, to my monthly drop-ins, to the public speaker series that I started, to the many events, consultations, and time spent checking in with residents at your door. At City Hall, I have been only one of a handful of of independent councillors unafraid to challenge the status quo. Nobody tells me how to vote. I vote for what I think is in the best interest of you, the residents of Rideau-Rockcliffe. And it's a ward which is an incredible place. Its unique and vibrant neighborhoods are located right next to the downtown core, and it is one of the most diverse wards in our city. We are lucky to live there, but we can do better. I hope to earn your trust and your vote on October 22nd. And thank you for watching, and thank you, Mark, for hosting.
All right. Thank you both for being part of the debate. Best of luck to both of you for the rest of the campaign.
Thank you.
And that's it for our debate for Rideau-Rockcliffe. I remind you that Election Day is October the 22nd, and Rogers TV and 1310 News will be bringing you live results as soon as the polls close at 8 o'clock on election night. We'll have coverage on both the television and the radio, and lots of analysis of what this will mean for the next 4 years in your community. So I hope you will join us then. Thank you for watching the local campaign.